So with the brain, we'll move on to the cervical spine. Cervical spine, I'm not going into the routine imaging, but then there's a particular condition known as Hirayama, patient positioning, because there's a positional technique, there is a modified technique when there is a imaging of the Hirayama disease. And you all guys are aware, Hirayama is you can see that pathology involving the cord, okay? And you need to modify the position. Now this is the position which is in neutral. Now you can see the neck, how the neck position here is, it is neutral over here, right? And it's also known as a juvenile spinal muscular atrophy, this Hirayama, which affects the distal upper limbs. And you need to demonstrate it by means of high resolution sagittal and axial images. And it also should be completed with gadolinium contrast, right? So in first thing, you will acquire the images in a neutral position. You will be doing sagittal T2 high resolution images with 3 mm slice thickness, okay? And then what you should do is you will do a sagittal and you will do axials. Then you need to do a flexion. Now the second image I've put is, see, because of the patient's comfort, if you're trying to compromise on the flexion, you will lose the details. So the second image is an incorrect position because there is only partial flexion of the neck. Actually, you're supposed to flex this much. So what you should do is raise keep some foam pads on their occipital area and elevate the head so that you give a proper flexion and such that the chin touches the neck. So in this position, this is a desired position. You need to keep the neck like this and repeat the same sagittal T2 weighted images and your axial T2 weighted images. Okay, now look at this. Now look at this. This is in a patient with normal cord and this is a patient with Hirayama. In normal and flexion, what happens is the cervical, when you go for the flexion, the cervical canal will increase. Since the dura is lack, it will compensate for the increased length over here in a normal individual, okay? And still the dura will be in close contact with the walls of the spinal canal. But in Hirayama, what will happen is, you can demonstrate the dura. Here you can see the compression of the dura on the cord. So for that, you need to achieve this with a flexion position, right? And when you're planning axials, look at the C6 vertebra, the superior aspect of the C6 vertebra. Just think like a line parallel to the superior aspect of the C6 vertebra. You need to plan sections parallel to that, right? And then T1 axials you will do with small slice thickness, 3 millimeters, completed with pre and post contrast. Now so this is the T2 weighted high resolution sagittal images in a patient with normal cord and in a patient with the Hirayama disease. So what you're going to do is with flexion, you're going to demonstrate these details. In a normal individual, what will happen is the dura is lack and it will compensate for the increased length when the patient is flexing his neck. Okay, the dura will remain in contact. It will be intact and without any displacement. But in a Hirayama patient, you can see that the dural component will compress on the spinal cord. So this is, this detail you can demonstrate only when you do in a flexion, flexed neck and high resolution images. And you need to do axials also and complete it with contrast with T1 pre and post contrast images. How do you plan axials? Now, you can the C6 vertebra, the superior aspect of the C6 vertebra, the end plate of the C6 vertebra, plan sections parallel to the this imaginary line going through the superior aspect of the C6 vertebra, right? So the axials will be global axials running from here to here and then completed with contrast, right? Next, we'll move on to lumbar spine. Now, most of us, we have, very hectic workload and we are, bent on finishing the cases as early as possible, fine. But then we forget that we need to keep the patient comfortable, particularly when you do a lumbar spine, the patient might have a very bad disc and just imagine if you have to lie down straight without moving your leg for about 10 minutes, it's impossible. So what you need to do now, you need to keep the patient comfortable. So never forget to place a knee pad. See that they rest their knees on the knee pad, put a Velcro band so that you get better images. And then when it comes to, there might be patients who are unable to lie down straight, you can occur in the beginning, and see that it passes through the canal very well in the center, so that you will get absolutely good images of the spinal cord. Okay, a slight modification in the lumbar spine, scoliosis and kyphosis imaging. So what diastomator minor? For that, you need to give exact images, the level of the pathologies. So that is very, very important how you plan your axials. Generally, we plan axials on your sagittal image, right? But when it comes to scoliosis, please acquire a coronal T2 first on your sagittal T2 images, and then keep side by side on both windows. You have one, plan the sections simultaneously on your sagittal and on your coronal. That is the best way you can demonstrate the cord pathologies very well. And when it comes to scoliosis or kyphosis imaging, you need to have shorter FOV, larger matrix, and you need to give high resolution image, because you need to appreciate the cord pathologies very well. Don't forget to paste the images like this. So usually a composed image you give, right? In the sagittal, you will give with the labeling the vertebrae. When it comes to scoliosis also, try to paste the coronal T2 images. So for example, this patient has a hemivertebra. It will be easier for you to demonstrate at which level the hemivertebra is. So anyway, you're doing it in 3 stations, might as well combine it and send the images to PAS. Okay? And you do routine sequences T1, T2, and when there is a fracture, suspected fracture or trauma, you do stir imaging, you do diffusion weighted imaging. If there's a fracture, to differentiate whether it is a pathological fracture or a traumatic fracture. But you should also know when to do in-phase and post-phase imaging. So, you know, many times the patient is taken off and then, you know, called in a different sitting for the sake of one sequence. So if at all the consultant or your request says they're suspecting a bone marrow infiltration or a bone marrow pathology, it is better to do in-phase and post-phase imaging. So in-phase, you know that there will be fat and water protons within a particular voxel. You get additive signal. But when it comes to an post-phase imaging, they will be opposed by 180 degrees and they cancel out each other. And so you get suppressed signals. So this sequence plays a significant role in evaluating marrow infiltration. And it hardly takes 20 seconds to 30 seconds to run about 13 to 15 slices, because you're not looking at the cord, you're looking at the vertebra or the bony details. So might as well do it whenever they're suspecting a bone marrow pathologies or metastasis, and patients with hemosiderin deposits, particularly in patients with fractures, sudden, you can go through the case sheet. That's why I said you read the request. A detailed history elucidation is very, very, very important. If there is no PG there, you will be the sole person responsible for an adequate imaging. So just don't read the request. Go through the case sheet, interact with the patient before you position them. And then you have, of course, a radiologist will be there to monitor and tell you what is to be done. Unfortunately, there's not a radiologist there at that particular point of time. You shouldn't skip it off. So read the request and then complete it with a dual echo sequence, right? The most challenging one will be your brachial plexus imaging, okay? So when it comes to brachial plexus imaging, there is no true planning of the sagittal or axials or coronals. It's all because of the complex anatomy of the brachial plexus that you need to modify your technique, and you need to evaluate the brachial plexus better so that you see all the segments of the brachial plexus from the roots to the branches. So what you should do is you should do oblique. So suppose this is a localizer. You need to plan oblique axials. Once you get the oblique axials, plan oblique coronals on the axials. Once you get the oblique coronals, you can, and also with the acquired axial images, you can plan oblique sagittals. So you will be able to appreciate the brachial plexus, the complete anatomy very well. So this will be a little bit time consuming, and you need to know how to plan the sections. So it is no true plane, it is just oblique in all 3 planes. And if there are any, particularly in trauma, right? Most of the times the brachial plexus imaging comes in a scenario where the patient has a history of trauma. So when you do the first myelogram sequence, you will be able to see the nerve root avulsions better. Now, when you're planning sections, plan thin sections. in that particular area. And you will be able to demonstrate it better. You know exactly where the pathology is. So you could focus more on that particular area. And don't forget to do a 3D axial fiesta, focusing on the pathological area or the area where you find some sort of edema or nerve root avulsions. Okay, so that is with brachial plexus. Fine.